Hello everyone, this is Gene and I'm back with another video. So, it's pretty early here in New York City today. It's like 7:40 on a Saturday. I hope everyone is doing well. So, as promised, today I'm back with a video with some deep thoughts. Then my little rant yesterday about that lady from Star Wars with that horrible, not even a sword stance. I'm sorry, but I just had to get that off of my chest. But it seems like you guys, at least some of you, I guess understood where I'm coming from with that one. So thank you. So let me just jump into it. Dana Schwartz has made a fool of herself again, in my opinion. So a few channels have covered it. I saw it briefly on Mecha Random video and then Geeks and Gamers. So apparently she has a recent post on her what is it, Twitter, I think it is, which shows Oscar the Grouch and a human woman standing next to him, and she takes a crack at, or at least it's being said that this is supposed to be taking a crack at men, because it says something to the effect of like, men in straight relationships, right? The idea being that the men are trash and the women are, I guess, better. Maybe it's playing on that idea of like the like not handsome guy getting the beautiful girl. I don't know. What I found funny and a bit sad, but first let me cover the funny part, is that if she was trying to imply that men were trash or men are trash with Oscar the Grouch, she probably chose like the wrong Sesame Street character. Really, you shouldn't be using any Sesame Street character to try to make that sort of point, but I don't know. These Twitterati people are very perverse. They're very perverse. But anyway, Oscar the Grouch is probably the last person you would want to use, or at least the last character, I should say, you would want to use to try to make an argument about people or men or whatnot being trash. Because first of all, I liked Oscar. I am an Oscar the Grouch fan. While I was not a big fan of Sesame Street growing up, of the characters who were on the show, one of the very few I could actually enjoy watching and relate to, even as a wee little girl, was Oscar the Grouch, because I saw a lot of my personality in him, right? Standoffish, grumpy, but he had a nice side. That's how I saw myself. That's how I still see myself in many ways. As I've stated in other episodes, I tend to gravitate toward the moody, grumpy characters. Like my favorite character in comics ever is Wolverine. And he's grousy and he's grumpy and he can be mean at times, but he also has this very noble, if tragic, element about him. And the funny thing is that I did some research. I was just doing some research on the character of Oscar the Grouch and his history. And apparently, Oscar, has a family, right? He has a mom and a dad, and he has a pet worm, and he has a girlfriend. So in other words, for all of his grouchy personality, he has a life, right? He has people who love him and who care about him, right? And his girlfriend naturally is going to be have a lot in common with him, so she's a grouch too. This is what I find funny about it. It's like you chose a character who is basically who is not, how would I put it? He's not a failure in life, right? Yeah, he's very I would say gruff and rough around the edges and perhaps blue collar in his own way, right? But it's not as if, he was rejected by the world. He wasn't, right? He has friends on Sesame Street, and like that was the whole thing, at least to me, about the character, is that he's grumpy and he's gruff and he's rough, but he really does have a soft side underneath it all, and he has friends and he has people he cares about and people who care about him. So I think that using him as some sort of dig at men was just plain stupid, because he has a full life. For a green furry puppet, he has a pretty good life, right? But the funny thing is that I was doing research on this character, and apparently his personality apparently comes from a very rude waiter that Jim Henson and another person encountered while they were at a restaurant called Oscar's Salt at the Sea, I think it is. And he was so over the top grumpy and grouchy that they were actually amused by it, and that formed the personality of Oscar the Grouch. And his voice was actually based on a cab driver. And I remember this is like the late '60s, right? So these are these very gruff New York City cab drivers, right? The hey yo Mac, where you headed? Those types, right? So they based the character around these gruff blue, at least in my opinion, in a sense, blue collar workers, right? These service workers who are in jobs that are low paying, where you have to deal with not nice people at times, right? Where you're living on tips, and she wants to compare men to to this character who was based on guys who were in thankless jobs and who were making a living to support themselves and oftentimes their families, especially with the cabbies. I mean, I take cabs a lot, and believe me, I've had my wars and my disagreements with cab drivers, right? But many of these cab drivers, right, even today, even as the stereotype has changed from a gruff guy from the Bronx to now a Middle Eastern immigrant. That's just the stereotype. But most of the cabs I pick up are usually being driven by someone who seems to be from the Middle East. But anyway, even today, even though the stereotype has changed, the motivation hasn't. Plenty of these cab drivers have told me how they have kids, they have wives, right? Sometimes here in the country with them, sometimes in their home country, and how they have to deal with sitting in a cab and driving for hours and hours a day and having to deal with people who won't pay their fare, or sometimes physically threaten them, because being a cab driver is dangerous, right? You think about it. You're allowing someone you don't know into your car, and you're taking them to a destination of their choosing that you don't always know, right? You don't know if they're setting you up to be jumped or killed or whatever. So I would never say that being a cab driver, for all the issues that I've had with cabbies in my life, I would never say being a cab driver is safe or easy. You are putting yourself at great harm's risk, and a lot of them do this for their families. So for her to I guess in a weird roundabout way to imply that these blue collar workers who have to deal with this deal with the hazards of the job and the disrespect of the customers, she's going to call them trash or try to imply that they're trash, I find on one hand funny, because a lot of these men are working to support their families, and two, very sad, because it's like, show them a little respect. Obviously, it's not a job you would do, or a job, more importantly, you don't have to do, because guess what? You're not doing it, Dana Schwartz, writer for She-Hulk, if the show ever gets released. But not more importantly, but another thing that I find funny is that as I was doing my research, I found that the character of Oscar was so popular with kids when the show aired that they actually sent, in their own way, fan mail to the character, sending him trash, sending him cans of sardines or old sneakers or used tissue or whatever, this stuff, right? Of course, they're kids. They don't understand why you don't send this stuff in, but the fact of the matter is that this character, right, this mean, grumpy character resonated with a bunch of little kids to the point that they sent him fan mail. They sent him in their own odd way tokens of appreciation. But that's the only reason why people send in fan mail, right? Because they like the actor, they like the product, and they want the actor, right, or they want the character to know. They want to express gratitude in most instances. Some people are stalkers, but generally speaking, right, when someone sends in fan mail, it's because they really care and they really feel a connection. So again, if little kids can resonate with this character, who is supposedly mean and grumpy and grouchy, then why can't she? Why does she have to try to use a character who, in my opinion, for all of his grousy attitude, has a lot of positives to him? Why does she have to use him as a negative to try to tear down men for no reason at all? I don't know her history with men or her father, but it's starting to be clear more and more that either she's trolling us all or she has deep-seated daddy issues that she needs to work out, because it's become ridiculous at this point with this woman. And more importantly, now more than ever, I don't want her writing She-Hulk, because here's the thing, She-Hulk does not hate men. She-Hulk does not have issues with guys. Hell, she is friends with Wolverine. Hell, she made a pass at him once. And here's the thing, even this, roided up She-Bulk that I cannot stand, I have made plenty of videos about how much I cannot stand this version of She-Hulk. Even this version of She-Hulk does not hate men. She has not been shown to be man-hating. If anything, she hates herself. She's incredibly self-loathing. And I personally hate that, because She-Hulk, even in her original Savage She-Hulk days, was never self-loathing. She was conflicted, that's true. But she wasn't self-loathing. And this version of She-Hulk is self-loathing without, in my opinion, valid reason to be, because of the poor storytelling by Mariko Tamaki and Jason Aaron and others. But that's a different story altogether. But even this version of She-Hulk that I vehemently dislike does not hate men. And a man-hater, a demonstrated man-hater, again, right? This isn't like a he said, she said situation where it can't be verified. She's making these statements on Twitter. A woman, in my personal opinion, a woman, a man, whatever it is, someone who hates men, who has hang-ups with the male gender. I don't mean has had a bad experiences with a few individual men. We've all had that. Men have had bad experiences with other men, right? Women have had bad experiences with other men. Hell, men have bad experiences with themselves, right? As do women, right? I've had bad experiences with other women. There are men who have had bad experiences with me, and I've certainly had my moments of I guess being down on myself is how I would put it. So that's life. I don't mean that, but I mean someone who from best I can tell seems to sincerely have a deep-seated issues and deep-seated, at least dislike. Maybe hatred is too strong a word, but at least a deep-seated dislike of the male gender. Someone with that type of view of men, in my opinion, should not be writing a character who actually has a healthy love of guys, and not just in a sexual sense, but really, really likes and gets along with men. If you think of the teams that She-Hulk has been on, like for example, the Fantastic Four, right? She mainly got along best with the guys, and whose role was she filling on the team? Because it was still four people. It wasn't Sue Storm's role. It was the Thing's role. She was the heavy. she was covering for the blue-eyed loving Thing. Right? So this is a character who actually has a pretty good and healthy relationship with most male characters, especially her father, the what is it, Savage? Not Savage, although he was featured in it. But John Byrne's run on She-Hulk would touch upon that on occasion, her relationship with her father, and it was very touching. And there was some tension there. She's an adult woman. Her dad still, kind of treats her like a kid, but all parents do that. It doesn't mean that they had a bad relationship. It's probably one of the few characters in all of media who actually has a healthy relationship with a parent. So if you're gonna hire someone who seems to have this disdain and dislike of men, then obviously I can't be watching, and I won't be watching the She-Hulk show. Maybe if I can find a way, maybe I can maybe check out the first episode if the show ever airs. Who knows what's gonna happen with the coronavirus and all that? But again, it's funny. It's like every story about her just highlights more and more and more how she should not be working on She-Hulk. They could hire literally anyone else. They could hire a typing monkey, and the monkey could do better than this woman at this point, because at least the monkey wouldn't have any hang-ups about people. So there's the funny part. The sad part to me is or at least to me is when I look at it in a broader context, which is that, how do I put it? Sesame Street came out in the late 60s, right? I think 1968, 1969, right? And the 60s and the 70s in general, excuse me, the 60s and the 70s in general were a very turbulent time in America and really in the world, right? You had all these wars going on. You had government systems rising and falling. There were protests and there were upheavals going on across the world, right? In particular, in places like Cuba, and in a lot of places in Asia, for example, Vietnam, where the U.S. had a hell of a lot to do with that, right? But whether it be at home or abroad, there was a lot of conflict going on, right? Whether it was the civil rights movement, or whether it was the Vietnam War, or whether it was the Bay of Pigs invasion, whether it was the Cold War, right? And the U.S.'s battle with trying to keep communism out of the world. Whatever it was, there was a lot of social upheaval, right? And a lot of instability in the 60s. And if I had to guesstimate, I would say at least from the 60s to about the 80s, right? And even then, there's a lot of debate for that. But I would say especially the 60s and the 70s were an especially turbulent time. And it was in this time period, right, in the mid and late 60s, that we got stuff like Star Trek, and we got stuff like Sesame Street, or even shows that we don't necessarily talk about, like what was it called? The Man from U.N.C.L.E., I think it was called, like this spy show, right? But it had an American spy, and then it had a Russian spy, and they would work together. If I remember correctly, the guy playing the Russian spy, the actor, he actually went on to play Ducky on NCIS years and years and years later. And I think a few years ago there was an updated modern film of The Man from U.N.C.L.E., right? That starred Henry Cavill, but I don't think it went anywhere. But my point is that at this time of real social unrest and uncertainty, right, in the 60s and 70s, especially in the mid and late 60s. You had these shows coming out that were trying to show not just the people of that era, people of that time, but also the people coming up after them, that we didn't have to be divided. We didn't have to be at war with each other. We could have our differences and respect our differences, but still be friends. You had people in media, not to say that Hollywood back then and the entertainment industry back then was perfect. It wasn't. But at the very least, you had some people who were trying to create these works that were about bringing people together, right? It's like that old Beatles song, right? Come together right now over me. And these, at least some of these works and franchises worked. They became popular. They became famous. They endured long after their creators' original intent, right? Star Trek outlived Gene Roddenberry. Sesame Street outlived Jim Henson because they had these positive messages that resonated with everyone, from 6-year-old kids, right, who figured, well, if Bert and Ernie can be friends, then me and this kid can be friends, to grown adults, right? Resonated with everyone and endured decades and decades and decades. So obviously there was staying power. And now these very franchises, right? These classic franchises that helped shape generations and show people, be they little kids or adults, that hey, we don't have to be a world divided. We can all be friends and get along. Now these very franchises are being used to tear people apart, to build up the divisions, right? The dividing lines of race and gender and sex and privilege and all this other stuff. These very franchises are being used to build up the walls and the divides that their original creators were trying to tear down. And that is to me the saddest part about the fall of these classic IPs, is that because now you have sincerely toxic people in Hollywood, right, getting these roles, getting these jobs as a writer or producer, whatever it is, and they're just toxic, right? The bulk of them are just incredibly toxic people who are more concerned about tearing down and tearing apart than they are about coming together, right? To reference FMA, because I am pure FMA trash and I don't apologize for it, right? They are only one half of alchemy, right? Alchemy has two parts to it: deconstruction and reconstruction. And sadly, people like Dana Schwartz and others like her that share her viewpoints that behave as she does, be they male or female, they have the deconstruction part down pat. They can tear anything down. They can bring the biggest IP, they can bring the longest lived series and tear it down to the floor. Look at modern day comics, they are crashing around us. Look at Disney Star Wars. It took 5 years to bring down a 40-year franchise. So they are absolutely perfect. They have mastered deconstruction. They have mastered destroying things. But they don't have one idea, one iota of a damn how to reconstruct, how to build, how to create. And when you're only good at one part of it, when you're only good at one part of it, well, you're just you're just unequipped for the job, in my opinion. If you can destroy instead of, or rather, if all you can do is destroy, and you can't create, maybe you should not be working in creative mediums like TV. Maybe you shouldn't be writing for a TV show about a female character who at one time represented female empowerment, right? And how do I put it? She-Hulk was just that girl, you know. She was feisty and sassy, and she didn't take BS, but she was fun-loving. She was a likable character, right? She was her own hero, and it was awesome. And now we have to deal with this, and God only knows what Dana Schwartz and others. Fortunately, she isn't the only writer, but still, it makes me wonder if a writer's room allows Dana Schwartz in, what the hell are they writing? But anyway, that's the video. Please let me know what you think, and I will see you all in the next one. Have a good day or night wherever you are. I hope you're happy. If you're not, hopefully you will be happy. Be healthy, hopefully, and be safe. Stay inside as much as you can. It's gloomy outside, so I don't think we'll be having a problem with that here in the city today. Alright, see y'all around. Bye.